right. Hello, AES New York section. Welcome everybody today. Got an exciting event for you online, right here via Zoom and our Facebook facilities. I want to welcome everyone to our event, Stepping Up the Stream. Our very special guest is Steve Savanyu. Steve is the Director of Educational Services for Audio Technica and also a freelance engineer and owner and operator of his own production company, Buford T. Hedgehog Productions. Steve does a lot of wacky gigs. Some of them are under non-disclosure as well. He's also an adjunct professor of audio at Kent State University, and most importantly, a really great person. I can say that firsthand. Thank you, Steve, for joining us today. And
Thank you, Roy.
My pleasure. Looking forward to your insight. I'm going to step away from the Zoom. I will be monitoring here in ground control. And Steve will make his presentation to us today of both physics of microphones as well as a lot of insight to his current operations of streaming during COVID and in general. He's got a really nice little setup that's working really well, and he's going to share that with us too later on in the event. Right now we're going to start with the physics of microphones. So everyone, please welcome Steve, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Roy, and everybody in the AES chapter and everybody who is watching. I'm going to try and share my screen, and hopefully this will be the right one. I'm the Director of Educational Services at Audio Technica. I've got 40 plus years in the audio industry. I do studio recording. I'm a classical recordist, live sound audio for video, broadcast audio. I'm the archive recordist for the Commission on Presidential Debates. I'm a working gigging sound guy, so I use this stuff every day. So it's not just some guy reading out of a book. Microphones, a brief look back. You know, these are microphones from the good old days. And as the crooner up there on the RCA 44B, interestingly enough, a lot of these microphones are still around. In fact, I've got one right here, the RCA 77DX, in my studio. Unfortunately, it is today only a prop because I haven't put a connector on the cable. And frankly, I have phantom power on my interface, and I want to keep phantom power as far away from this guy as I can. Technology has changed, thank goodness. It's improved a lot, but still microphones are classics, and there still see a lot of the classic ones used today. Interestingly enough, microphones still hold their value. So if you're looking for something to collect in these days of uncertain economic times, microphones hold their value. I did a little quick research a couple days ago. RCA 44B ribbon, $3,800 on eBay. The 77, $2,395, and an original Neumann KM84, $1,799 on eBay. Unfortunately, other technology that we use day in and day out in the studio hasn't held its value too much. That's a 56-channel Midas Heritage 3000 console for $4,700. You have to come and pick it up because it weighed 600 pounds. How many remember the DAT machine? $49 for parts on eBay. And of course, the original PC, it's in the dumpster for nothing at all. Couple quick rules that I like talked about in physics of microphones. First is signal to noise ratio. Signal's the desired sound source. Noise is everything else that's expressed in a ratio. The better the ratio is, signal to noise, the better off we are. Hopefully I'm the signal today, and noise is all the other stuff that you hear in the background. Acoustical feedback, we all know what that is, right? It's a little squeal. I love it on TV when somebody comes up to a microphone, they touch it, it squeals, and everybody knows it must be a microphone. We all know what it is, but really, how does it happen? And that's when the sound pressure level of the amplified sound at the microphone is equal to or greater than that of the original sound source. And I could demonstrate that, but I won't because it's a virtual seminar. So let's get into the physics of microphones and talk a little bit about the nature of sound and a quick review. Two things I want to talk about. One is frequency and directionality, because we're going to use that to our benefit. High frequencies behave like a spotlight. Low frequencies behave like a bare light bulb. Now, I was standing on the street corner the other day in my little town of Hudson, Ohio, and this guy drove up in the coolest car ever with the biggest car stereo known to mankind. What did I hear first? The low frequencies. Why? They're huge waveforms. They emanate in all directions. It wasn't until he was right behind me at the stoplight that I realized he was listening to heavy metal polkas. So, nature of sound, high frequencies behave like a spotlight, low frequencies behave like a bare light bulb. We will use that to our advantage in a number of things. We represent frequency response, how a microphone responds to relative amplitudes of all frequencies presented to its input. The nice thing about this is all the microphone manufacturers use the same standards. So we can compare microphones between Audio Technica microphones and, say, other manufacturers' microphones, because all the microphone manufacturers have agreed upon, and we kind of share our measurement style data. Obviously, we represent this three-dimensional frequency response curve on a two-dimensional graph. Wider, low to high is better, flatter is better. But most microphones have a tailored response or some colorization to give that microphone its specific flavor, its specific timbre, its specific colorization is a good way to say it. We tailor the response of the microphone. Probably the most common tailored response microphone is the SM58, manufactured by Shure. It has a vocal presence peak. It gives you a slight boost at 2 kilohertz, followed by a slight dip at 3 kilohertz, which makes that microphone stand out in a vocal mic, which is why it's a very preferred vocal microphone. Interestingly enough, the human voice, and then we'll get into microphones themselves. The voice range is approximately 100 to 6 kilohertz, AM radio sound. And it takes 80% of our voice energy to go below 500 hertz. So the guy that's singing the low notes in the choir, not too many choirs singing today, is going to use a lot more energy than, say, the little screaming kid that's singing the high notes. And the presence range, which we just talked about, is between 2 kilohertz and 5 kilohertz. And that's what maintains intelligibility and dialogue. And it makes the voice sound like it's near or next to you. So in the dialogue recording and film, we're striving for that presence range. Back in the good old days of sound systems, when sound systems were columns of 8-inch loudspeakers, that's the original line array, microphone manufacturers would tailor the microphone response to increase that presence range, because the loudspeaker systems in the good old days couldn't reproduce that. So to make the vocals stand out or make the vocals cut, we'd boost about 2K and with a slight cut about 3K, and that was known as the presence peak. Microphones in the good old days actually had that tailored into the response curve, and that's what gave them their specific tonality or specific colorization, for lack of better words. So we're going to talk real quick about microphones. We're going to get into stepping up the stream and how we're doing things with live streaming. We'll talk about different types of microphones. We'll talk about how they generate sound, and we'll talk about how they the angles, how they pick up sound. We'll talk about mics and monitor options. We'll talk about closer and louder. We'll talk about more is not always better. So a microphone is a transducer, and it's a device that converts one form of energy to another. We all know that a loudspeaker converts electrical energy and mechanical energy into acoustical energy. And a microphone, on the other hand, converts acoustical energy into mechanical energy into electrical energy. So the big question that always comes up at one of these classes is, can I use a loudspeaker as a microphone? Absolutely. You do it every time you go to a fast food restaurant and the girl says, would you like fries with that? The loudspeaker that they are talking to you on is the microphone that you're talking back to them on. Now, can I use a microphone as a loudspeaker? I probably could, but I wouldn't really want to. In fact, when I was a kid, I plugged the microphone in my little tape recorder into the earphone jack by mistake. And lo and behold, I heard sound out of the microphone. I said, wow, this is really cool. So I got all my friends together. I said, take a look at this. Check this out. I cranked it up and whammo, I blew the microphone and was not a happy kid. Here's a good example of a old NS10 woofer being used as a subharmonic microphone for a kick drum, mounted in a very heavy-duty mic stand. Yamaha actually markets a product called the Sub Kick, which is NS10 loudspeakers mounted in this cute little drum housing to be used as a low-frequency pickup device. So let's talk about the three main types of microphones that we use today in recording and live sound, and of course now streaming. The most common type is the dynamic microphone. The dynamic microphones will handle fairly unlimited SPLs or sound pressure levels. They don't require power to operate. You can take a lot of abuse. When I do this class live, I usually throw a dynamic microphone on the floor, pound nails with it, beat it on the table, and so forth. However, dynamic microphones are very difficult to miniaturize. And if anybody remembers the broadcast newscasters from the late 60s, maybe early to mid 60s, they often wore a dynamic microphone and a large string around their neck. And that dynamic microphone was probably about the size of a handheld microphone today. And that's how they did it back in the good old days. Condenser microphones are the most popular microphone used in studio and most broadcast pickup applications or film video applications. They typically have a much louder or hotter output, a much wider frequency response. They do require power to operate, and they can be made very, very tiny. A lot of times, the little hidden microphones worn by actors on a film set are condenser microphones. And finally, the ribbon microphone, which was quite popular back in the 30s and 40s, has made a comeback. They have a smooth top end and a very rich low end. They'll handle some fairly high SPLs, although the traditional ribbon mics, like my RCA 77 here, were very fragile and could be damaged by somebody blowing into them or laying them on their side, or heaven forbid, if you plugged them into a circuit with phantom power and you weren't aware of it, you could damage the microphone as well. The traditional big broadcast studio microphone from the 50s television days was probably a ribbon. The Larry King Live microphone was a ribbon. As I say in a nutshell, choose condensers for most recording applications, dynamic for high SPL live sound sources, and ribbons to tame the harsh digital edge. And I'll get into that in just a minute. So let's talk about the physics of how each of these works. The dynamic microphone works like a motor. It is like a loudspeaker in reverse. A diaphragm attached to a coil of wire floats on a paper core over a magnet. Air hitting the diaphragm causes the magnet to move back and forth. The coil of wire moves over the magnet, and lo and behold, 7th grade science says when we move a coil of wire over a magnetic structure, we get a voltage, and that is our audio signal. Obviously, the dynamic microphone, because it's a motor, takes a lot of energy to move it. It's very difficult to miniaturize this motor assembly. Thus, dynamic microphones are fairly large. They're very rugged. I've seen guys pound nails with dynamic microphones, and they'll take an unlimited amount of SPL. In fact, one of the microphone manufacturers back in the 60s used to fire a starter's pistol off next to a dynamic microphone, saying, look, it'll handle the sound of a gunshot going off. But what they didn't tell anybody was just about any dynamic microphone in those days would handle the same sound. Now, if we move into a condenser microphone, now we're doing something called a variable capacitance principle. It's an electrostatic principle. In fact, across the pond, they'll call these capacitor microphones. So we have an electrically charged diaphragm and an electrically charged backplate with an insulating spacer between them. Air hitting the diaphragm causes to move back and forth. The diaphragm's movement in relation to the backplane varies the capacitance, generating a very, very tiny electrical signal that needs to be amplified by an amplifier. That's this little guy right here, which is the electronic circuit that boosts the signal to something that we can utilize. That amplifier needs a voltage to operate, which is known as the bias voltage. And that voltage can come from a number of different places, maybe a battery, from an external power supply, or right down the microphone cable itself. Now, this capsule's diaphragm assembly has to be very close to that amplifier's input. So if you take the capsule off an interchangeable condenser microphone, you can sometimes do that with some of the stick mics. There is a small brass tip where that capsule makes contact to the amplifier circuit, and that's very sensitive to static electricity. I live in a place that gets very dry in the wintertime, so if you're changing your capsules on your condenser microphones, don't touch that little brass tip because you can fry the FET electronic circuitry inside there. Some condenser microphones will have an input pad, minus 10 dB, for example, which will allow the microphone to handle some fairly high SPL capabilities. And these condenser microphones can be made very, very tiny, unlike a dynamic microphone. The third type of microphone that's very common in what we do today is the ribbon microphone. The ribbon microphone in its purest form is the most basic form of transducer. I've got a foil ribbon. Imagine peeling the foil off a gum wrapper and making a small accordion out of it, placing that ribbon in a large magnetic structure. Air hits the ribbon, causes it to move inside the magnet, breaks the magnetic field lines. We know that breaking magnetic field lines causes a small electrical current to be generated. That current was boosted in a ribbon microphone using something called the step-up transformer. Now, the problem with these original ribbon microphones, if I blew into this RCA 77B, I'd probably blow the ribbon right out of the magnet. If I put phantom power on it, the original ribbon microphones used a center tap transformer, and that transformer with its center tap connected to the ground or the shield circuit on that 3-conductor microphone cable. The voltage coming up that microphone cable was pins 1 and 2, referenced to the ground point. That was the return path for that voltage. Through that center tap transformer on a ribbon microphone, it drew a lot of current. The ribbon saw that current draw and acted like a fuse, so you basically kissed that ribbon microphone goodbye. Interestingly enough, modern ribbon microphones have electronics in them to properly impedance match to the input circuitry. Now I'll go back in history a little bit. When the original ribbon microphones were developed, they were designed to work into broadcast mixers that utilized a 600 ohm input circuit. So these ribbon microphones had a low impedance output to drive the 600 ohm input circuit on these old mixers. Transformer coupled to these input circuits on the old mixers. Migrate to a modern day console with an active op-amp input circuit. And now we found that the old ribbon microphones just didn't have enough output power. What we found at Audio-Technica when we developed our ribbon microphones is we made the output of the ribbon microphone using electronics in the mic appear to the input to the console or microphone preamp as a condenser microphone. So it impedance matched better, had a better level match to the modern day mic pre's, and now the AT ribbon microphones work much better with the modern day mic pre's as compared to my RCA 77. There's companies out there like Cloud that make a thing called a cloud lifter that's basically an impedance matching device, allowing me to match my old ribbon microphones to a modern day mic pre. Interestingly enough, why are ribbon microphones so popular today? Ribbon microphones became popular today because when I started recording back in the analog days, we were taught to record hot and record bright. So we recorded as loud as we could. And even if we put the meters in the red a little bit, that was okay. That was nice distortion. And we were taught to record with the highest, brightest signal we could. So we used condenser microphones with our extended high frequency response. Every time I did a bounce down or a dub down, I had something called generation loss. And by the time I got to my final mix down, I could either take away a little bit of the top end if I had too much, or I was just right. Modern day digital recording, this was one of the questions on my midterm. I says, what happens when you do a bounce down in a digital recording? If you left the question blank or said nothing, you got it right. Because every time you do a bounce down in a digital recording, there was no generation loss. So there was no loss of high frequencies. So guys that were taught to record hot and bright, by the time you bounced down on a digital recording, you found that the recording sounded brittle and harsh. Ribbon microphones gave you a smooth, silky top end as compared to the extended high end on a condenser microphone. And the question came out that the ribbon microphones had a smoother top end. So guys were rediscovering their ribbon microphones. I just happened to look down at the questions and somebody wanted to know what XLR stands for, and we'll get to that later. And it doesn't mean ground left and right, by the way. So we'll come back to that in a moment. So ribbon microphones, the silky top end, rich low end on a ribbon mic really help tame the harsh digital edge. Next thing we'll talk about is transient response. A dynamic microphone responds slowly because it has to move that physical motor. A condenser microphone with its thin diaphragm is going to respond to those transients much quicker. So you're going to see condenser microphones the go-to choice for things that require, plucked strings and the daintiness of a hi-hat and things of that kind of, those sounds of those kind of natures. I brought in the world-renowned Mr. Fish. He played the triangle for the Philharmonic. And of course, they're not playing right now. He's out of work like most musicians that I know because of COVID. But he did come in and he played the triangle for me, and I did put him outside. I recorded him. I shot it on an oscilloscope, and I used a condenser microphone and a dynamic microphone to capture this sound. If you notice, the transient response on the condenser mic is like a fast sports car. Quick off the stoplight, 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, stops on a dime. The dynamic microphone, on the other hand, is like one of those big double-decker buses or the double-section buses that roam the city streets of New York City. It takes a few seconds for that bus to get up to 60, and heaven forbid if somebody runs out in front of that pedestrian runs out in front of that bus, it's going to take a while to stop. Thus, on the dynamic microphone response, you see all of the response of the diaphragm actually moving back and forth over the motor coil. So, condenser microphones on transient sources, dynamic microphones, I wouldn't use a dynamic microphone on, say, a hi-hat. So we talked about how microphones generate sound. Let's talk about how they pick up sound. Frequency and direction, or pickup pattern and directionality. And directionality is how microphones respond to sounds arriving to them at different directions. Omnidirectional microphones favor all directions equally. Directional microphones favor a specific direction, with the favored direction being known as the on-axis direction. All other directions are the off-axis direction. Now, what a lot of folks don't know is all microphones are born omnidirectional, and manufacturers engineer specific mechanical acoustical designs into the microphone that affect the directionality or the pickup pattern. And the way they do that is using an acoustic labyrinth and our very favorite term, which is known as phase cancellation. As we talk about phase, we say that when two things are in phase, like the racing roller coasters at Kings Island Amusement Park, which just opened this week, by the way, if two things are in phase, they're going to add together. But if one roller coaster is going up the hill while the other roller coaster is going down the hill, we would say they're out of phase. And things that are out of phase will subtract from each other. So all microphones are born omnidirectional. The microphone manufacturers put an acoustic labyrinth so that sound hitting the back of the diaphragm arrives, because it's got to travel through this acoustic labyrinth, at a slightly delayed time from sound hitting the front of the diaphragm. Thus, the sound hitting the front of the diaphragm is slightly out of phase from that, or the back of the diaphragm is slightly out of phase from that hitting the front of the diaphragm. Thus, we get phase cancellation taking place, and we get a directional pickup microphone. Interestingly enough, if I take the head case off of my directional microphone and cover the ports, it will make that a very crummy omnidirectional microphone. And I usually demonstrate this when I do this class live through a very large sound system, and I guarantee you I will make that thing feedback, which is why when you see somebody cupping the microphone, whether it be a rap act or a country act or a bad rock act, the guy that's doing the cup the microphone for that really cool aesthetic effect is actually taking a really good directional microphone and making it into a really awful omnidirectional microphone. So remember that the next time you do one of these acts, when I tell the artist that, look, microphones are like children. They have a head case and they have a handle. I handle my kid by the hand, not by the head. Do the same with your microphones and you'll be better off. So microphone manufacturers also represent their directionality using something called the polar pattern. Again, this is a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional thing. And because all microphone manufacturers use the same analogy, the same terminology, it allows us to make a really good quick comparison between two microphone models from two different manufacturers, pick up patterns by just looking at the symbolism. Omnidirectional is the widest pickup pattern, meaning it picks up equally from all directions. As we start to move down towards the line gradient or shotgun microphone, we get narrower, narrower, and narrower, and narrower, a more narrow pickup pattern. And of course, like every rule, there's always an exception to the rule, and the exception to the rule is the bidirectional or figure of eight pattern. Now, as we start to move down to a narrower angle of or a narrower pickup pattern, we talk about two angles: the angle of acceptance and the angle of rejection. And by how we determine those two angles, we can use those angles to our benefit. The other thing is some microphones can be multi-pattern, and we use multiple diaphragms in these microphones and a switching circuit that allows us to combine the diaphragms together to get a bidirectional pickup pattern, a directional pickup pattern, or an omnidirectional pickup pattern. Audio-Technica manufactures three different multi-pattern microphones in their product line. Shure Sennheiser AKG also make multi-pattern microphones. There are some microphones out there that have variable polar patterns, and they actually use a circuit that you can vary the polar pattern from an omnidirectional all the way down to a figure of eight pattern by how much of each of the two diaphragm signals are combined together. So knowing the directionality of microphones, we can apply that to what we do, and we have to know the angles. And as Bing Crosby once said, everybody's got a little angle, and how we utilize that angle can benefit us to our benefit. The two angles that we're going to talk about are the angle of acceptance and the null point. The angle of acceptance is the optimum coverage angle in which a microphone picks up sound. Outside the acceptance angle, level and performance will drop off very steeply until I get to the null point. And the null point is a measurement in a directional microphone where maximum sound rejection occurs. And it depends on the type of microphone. This is key in minimizing acoustical feedback in a live sound situation or picking up unwanted sound in like a studio situation. Now, interestingly enough, the better the microphone is, the better the off-axis performance of the microphone is. And what's key to that is we want the off-axis performance, i.e. the drop-off, to occur equally for the entire frequency range. What happens in a inexpensive microphone or a microphone that has poor off-axis performance is the frequencies don't drop off equally across the range. Maybe 3K doesn't drop off as smoothly as the rest of the frequency response in a given microphone. That frequency happens to be prominent in the off-axis range, which makes it susceptible to being picked up in acoustical feedback situations. So the better the microphone is, the better the off-axis response is going to be. Ideally, we want it to drop off the same for all frequencies. Now, knowing the acceptance angle and the angle, the null point, we can use those to our advantage. So as we go from an omnidirectional, the first one we come to is the cardioid. The cardioid's acceptance angle is about 131 degrees. It's the classic heart-shaped cardioid pickup pattern. The null point is 180 degrees off axis for a typical cardioid. So now if I'm using foldback speakers on stage in front of me, I can put the monitor speaker directly in front of the performer, and it's going to have minimal effect because the microphones are going to pick up the sound coming back off that monitor speaker. Now I want to narrow the angle of acceptance. So I start to squeeze the angle of acceptance, and I start to squeeze the angle of acceptance. I come to the hypercardioid microphone. The acceptance angle in the hypercardioid is about 105 degrees. However, this is physics, and something's got to give someplace. It's not a free ride here for the angle of acceptance. So as I squeeze the angle of acceptance to make it narrower, something's got to give, and lo and behold, a lobe pops out at the back end of this microphone right here. And that little lobe is susceptible to sound, which means if I place a monitor speaker right in front of that microphone, now that speaker's going to be playing back into that lobe, and it's going to pick up that monitor speaker, and lo and behold, it's going to feed back. Now, somebody said at one of my seminars, well, what's a supercardioid? A supercardioid microphone is about halfway between a cardioid and a hypercardioid. 115 degree angle of acceptance, but it has a slightly smaller rear lobe. And then there's a subcardioid microphone, which is halfway between an omni and a cardioid. It's got a little bit more of a directional pattern, about 150 degrees, but it has a very wide lobe across the back end. Audio-Technica manufactures omnidirectional microphones, cardioid microphones, hypercardioid microphones, and line gradient. They don't offer a supercardioid microphone. I think Shure makes a supercardioid model, and I don't know if Sennheiser or AKG make supercardioid models. So it's just going narrower and narrower. As I continue to narrow my angle of acceptance, I get into what we call the line gradient microphone, more commonly known as the rifle mic across the pond or the shotgun mic here in the US. And by the way, I do this class for broadcast and film school folks, and I travel normally when I do this live, and I fly with a big case of microphones, and I was carrying the microphones on a plane one day, and the TSA guy said, "What's in the case?" And not thinking, I said, "Shotguns." Needless to say, I missed my flight, and I got to see the little back room. So be very careful when you're traveling with these. These are line gradient microphones. Typically, a line gradient microphone has about a 30-degree angle of acceptance. However, there are now multiple small lobes on the back side of this microphone. You can see them here, here, and here, which are sensitive to sound pickup. Thus, if you're doing a film situation and you're trying to use a shotgun mic on a boom pole in a low ceilinged room, those lobes are going to pick up audio reflections off the ceiling of that room, which can possibly be a problem. So typically, if I'm doing a boom mic situation indoors, I'll use a cardioid mic on the boom, using the shotgun mics in a higher ceilinged room or outdoor applications. Shotgun microphones are often used in live sound situations. If the acts are using in-ear monitors to pick up audience response, they're also now in the COVID world being used by news gathering folks to stay 6 feet away from the person they're asking the question. So a new use for shotgun microphones. The oddball in this case is the bidirectional or figure of eight. So this is looking down on the top of the ribbon microphone. So the bidirectional is going to pick up equally from the front and rear of the capsule, and the null points are now 90 degrees off axis, which means I can do a host and guest situation for a podcast or a radio show using a single microphone with both of us facing the front and the rear of the microphone. I can then position the microphone between me and the guest so I can favor the quieter talker. And now the producer can sit off the side and whisper all the notes and questions that are coming in on the Facebook feed, and they're not going to be picked up. Ribbon microphones, by design, naturally have this pickup pattern. The RCA 77D, by the way, is a bidirectional ribbon microphone that actually has a mechanical shutter that, when I turn this little lever in the back of the microphone, moves the mechanical shutter across the back of the ribbon to make it somewhat of a directional ribbon microphone, which is kind of unique and interesting in that. So I always touch on this when I do this class live, and I'll touch on this for a minute. Let's talk about the angles and stage monitors. Good example that's really visually can be shown visually quite well. So here I've got my singer. He's using a cardioid microphone. The monitor's right in front of him. Now I've got a singer that wants to play acoustic guitar while he sings, so he needs to be back a little bit from his microphone. So we put a hypercardioid mic on him. And notice, in order to do that, the null point changes to about 60 degrees off axis from my on axis point. And I use 2 stage monitors. The question always comes up, well, I was at this concert last week and I noticed this guy singing and playing, and he had 3 stage monitors in front of him. What's the 3rd stage monitor for? Believe it or not, the 3rd stage monitor is the teleprompter. And Clare Brothers actually makes a monitor housing that holds a 19-inch flat screen TV, so they can run the teleprompter and it looks like another stage monitor. So on that classic rocker that's, getting up there in the years, and you see him looking down a lot, he's not looking at the set list. He's reading the words off that teleprompter monitor. So now to live sound guys everywhere, the bane of our existence, and that is the background singers, because we all know the situation. The significant other of the drummer has to be in the band, and so the significant other of the drummer is a background vocalist. So if the background vocalists know how to balance and sing, we can use a single cardioid microphone on them. They're going to balance themselves by how they physically space in front of that microphone, and I can share them with a single monitor. Now, if I've got 3 background singers, the one in the middle is the diva significant other of the drummer. I make certain that their microphone is really blinged up well, little, Swarovski crystals on it, or maybe a special color, and maybe chrome plated or whatever. And so what I do is, now they have their own microphones. The only people that have to suffer are the other 2 vocalists, because I don't put that significant other's vocal in the house mix. So everybody else in the audience has no idea. That person's just, they're just cracking the notes away, and the only other people that are suffering are the other 2 vocalists. So it's a good way to deal with that significant other diva background vocalist that we all have to deal with. So anyway, moving on, physics. Somebody's inverse squirrel. Inverse squirrel is the sound calculating squirrel 2, squirrel 2, and by 6 dB. Everybody get what I talked about? What am I talking about? It's this. The closer you are, the louder you get. So moving from 1 inch to 2 inch will give me a 6 dB drop in sound pressure level. From 2 inch to 4 inch, I'll get another 6 dB drop. From 4 inch to 8 inches, I'll get another 6 dB drop, which means from moving from 1 inch to 8 inches out, I get about an 18 dB drop in sound pressure level. So you're dealing with a vocalist that's not very loud, or you're dealing with a talker that's not very loud. The thing to do is don't turn the sound system up, just tell them to move closer to the microphone. Of course, in these days, I always tell the vocalist to bring their own microphone. And we talk about how to clean and sanitize microphones. I actually have little disposable covers that I can give someone to put over a microphone if they want in a live sound situation. Um, and so, but the closer you are, the louder you get. So if you've got someone where you just can't get enough gain out of the system, have them move closer to the microphone. Let's talk about sensitivity and output level. Sensitivity is the amount of output level for a given input. It's stated in dB, and it compares it to a reference value. And the reference value is typically an SPL of 1 Pascal, about 94 dB SPL. So we're going to compare the input level of this microphone to our reference of 94 dB. And typically that's going to be a lower negative value. And we found the lower the negative value is, the higher the sensitivity is. So a minus 40 dB output is going to be louder than a minus 60 dB output. Typically, condenser microphones will have a higher sensitivity, more output. They'll also give you a more usable output with a more distant sound source. And a dynamic microphones typically have a lower sensitivity or a lower output level, which means they're going to excel on high SPL applications because they're not going to overload the input to the mic pre as much. Consequently, we talk about something that we're going to get a worldwide first term here in just a minute. But I want to talk about working distance for a minute. Working distance, film guys, video guys will say, what's the reach on that microphone? First of all, microphones don't have reach. If I could invent a microphone that could reach out and grab a sound, like a telephoto lens can zoom in on an actor on a set, then I wouldn't be here today. I'd be on a beach in Acapulco with my toes in the water and a drink with an umbrella in the glass. However, microphones don't have reach. They have what they call working distance. The only way I'm going to increase the gain is to get the microphone closer to the subject. Now, depending on where I'm at, if I'm out in the middle of the Mojave Desert on a clear, cool night, I can get pretty far away from my subject because it's pretty quiet. But if I'm on the middle of Fifth Avenue in New York City at rush hour, and there's tons of traffic and tons of people, well, maybe not tons of people today, socially distanced, tons of traffic, I'm not going to be able to get a very good working distance because my signal, the guy I want to pick up, to noise ratio has just gone down the drain. Thus, I've got to get the microphone closer. However, as I get to a more narrower pickup microphone, I can increase my working distance because the microphone's rejecting more sounds from the side and the rear. Thus, with an omnidirectional microphone, I get about a 1 foot working distance. With a cardioid, I can get almost twice the working distance. With a hypercardioid, I can get twice the working distance just by going to a tighter pattern. Go to a shotgun or a line gradient microphone, I can get a greater working distance, 3 to 4 feet in some cases, depending on the environment. That brings us to the world release of a Steve term. And I talk about transparent versus adjacent style microphones and working distance. A transparent microphone versus an adjacent microphone. Not to be confused, adjacent means close to or in close proximity to. Not to be confused with something known as the proximity effect. And the proximity effect is as I move closer to a directional microphone, I will get an increase in low frequency response, a bass boost. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. As I move further away from that directional microphone, that will go away. A vocalist will use that to their advantage. A radio talent will use that to their advantage. That's known as proximity effect. I'm going to talk about a new term, first time ever launched in the world of microphones, an adjacent versus transparent microphone. A transparent style microphone means the volume change versus the working distance is more gradual. Thus, as I move away from the microphone, the level is going to drop off very slowly. The sound as I move away from the microphone will sound more natural and less forced. I can put this microphone further away from my sound source because it's more sensitive to sound in general. However, a transparent style microphone is much more susceptible to background noise. It's going to pick up more things around it. On the other hand, an adjacent microphone, the volume change versus the working distance is more pronounced. It's going to drop off very quickly. As I move away from that microphone, that level is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's going to drop off like that. It also is going to emphasize the voice in a little bit more of a tighter close-up way if you're doing a dialogue thing. And the sound source has to be very close to the microphone. It's also less sensitive to other sounds around it, thus it rejects more background noise. A dynamic microphone is typically an adjacent style microphone. As I move away from the capsule, the level drops off very quickly. Thus, when I see a rock band that's got dynamic microphones being used for drum overheads, I know one of three things. Either the lighting guy is doing the mics today, they got a super deal at the big box music store, where you buy 6 and get 5 for free of that $39 dynamic mic, or they have no idea how microphones work. Consequently, streamers and the Twitch stream guys, the Twitch game streamers, are starting to migrate to dynamic microphones because they want to be able to talk fairly close to the microphone without the microphone picking up the game sounds that are coming back at them, but they still want to experience the game sounds as they're playing the game. So the Twitch guys have discovered some of the dynamic handheld microphones and are using those for their Twitch streams. So transparent style microphone, gradual level change as you move away from the microphone. An adjacent style microphone, volume changes rapidly as you move away from the microphone. World premiere of a new microphone term to you guys at this seminar. Now we'll talk about maximum sound pressure level. As we know, sound is pressure. Maximum SPL is the loudest sound before the microphone distorts. It's expressed in decibels. Obviously, the larger the value is, the better. Typically, dynamic microphones are going to handle a lot higher SPLs than other types because it's pretty hard to bottom out that motor. Condenser microphones, it's not the diaphragm bottoming out as it is the electronics that overload on loud sounds. Thus, condenser microphones will often have a max SPL rating. So you need to be aware of that. Some microphones, primarily condenser microphones, will have a low cut filter or high pass filter. This is an important tool. Engage this low cut filter on all frequencies except desired low frequency sources like kick drums and so on. Your vocals are going to pop out of your mix. It's going to help minimize the pickup of unwanted mechanical noises and things. Secondly, polarity and phase. We talked about polarity and phase. Polarity is a wave relationship over time. Polarity is electrical connections. Most microphones, positive pressure on the diaphragm means positive voltage on pin 2. Negative pressure on the diaphragm means positive voltage on pin 3. By flipping it with one of these little phase reversers or polarity reversers allows me to put the diaphragms out of phase so I can use the microphones in a push-pull arrangement, like a top and bottom snare mic. Last thing I'll talk about before we get into step up the stream is something called phantom power. Condenser microphones need a voltage to operate the electronics in the microphone and in some cases to bias the backplane. That voltage can come from a battery in the microphone, but it's not true phantom power, or come through something called phantom power. We use a 3-pin microphone connector and a 3-pin cable or a 3-conductor cable for microphones. It's a balanced audio cable, meaning the audio signal is balanced. It's traveling in 2 directions at the same time. Thus, if anything is induced across that balanced line, it'll cancel out, which is a good thing. So I can run my balanced mic lines across AC power stingers and not have any issues. I can also induce a voltage on that microphone to power my condenser microphones, and that's known as phantom. And phantom voltage is the positive voltage is across the 2 signal conductors reference to the ground or shield conductor on the microphone. The question came up, is there a benefit of using the low-cut filter on the microphone or the preamp? Good question. I will engage the low-cut filter on the microphone just to minimize any kind of low frequency pickup, especially mechanical noise that might be generated coming up the cable or the mic stand into the microphone. So I've used the low cut filter on the microphone, but and then you've also got it on the preamp as well. Looking down at the questions here, doing multitasking things. 48 volts is the most common phantom power voltage. By the way, we use a 3-pin connector on microphones. That is often known as the XLR connector. And somebody wanted to know what XLR stands for. It doesn't mean ground, left, and right. It stands for the X series by the ITT Canon Connector Company. The L stands for latching or locking. And the R stands for rubber or resilient, which is what the insert is that holds the pins. And the original XLR connectors use a rubbery material so the pins could float a little bit and line up better. XLR. By the way, that's worth 6 points on my midterm bonus question. Phantom power can come from mixers, can come from external power supplies or batteries. So somebody said, what happened if I plug a dynamic microphone into a circuit with phantom power? It doesn't affect dynamic microphones because the dynamics microphone's connections are only to the 2 signal leads. There's not the capsule, the coil is not on the shield part. There's no connections made to the ground. However, it can damage some vintage ribbon microphones because of the center tap transformer. So be very careful with vintage ribbon mics and phantom power. In fact, I've actually got phantom power turned on my interface, and this ribbon mic is in the room. I normally don't do that. But in this case, there's no connection on it, so I can't accidentally plug it into my supply. If you, one of my final questions on my final is, what happens when I plug a dynamic microphone into a circuit with phantom power? If you leave that one blank, by the way, you get it right. And by the way, I was in New York City last spring. You know, I was going to do a gig before COVID hit, and I was standing on the street corner, and a man hopped out of a fast taxi wanting to sell me this. He said, it makes cheap microphones sound really expensive, expensive microphones sound really hot. And I said, okay. I just walked away as fast as I could the other way and thought, well, gee, maybe that guy will be a problem someday. I normally go into miking the really difficult stuff. If I have time at the end, I'll do that. But I'm just watching my clock, and I want to get into stepping up the stream because the world of audio and live sound and event sound has changed big time, and streaming is becoming part of the new norm. It's a new entertainment normal, as we say, live from the living room. Concerts. I gig in the summertime, and my gig calendar from March 10th through the end of the year completely disappeared. Concerts, tours, festivals, events canceled. I record symphony orchestras. My symphony concerts for the year are canceled. I record choral groups. Choral groups probably for a long time aren't going to do a whole lot of performing. There are some venues that are restarting live entertainment, drive-in concerts. I did a drive-in high school graduation, but social distance limitations and congregating at event limits by states are limiting the amount of concerts. So what's happening is artists are looking for places to perform, and people are still wanting entertainment. So all of a sudden, live from the living room is becoming the new norm. So when this whole thing happened, and all the states started locking down, and people said, well, gee, I got to perform. So they'd set their phone up and they would live stream from their smartphone. And smartphones have a pretty decent camera, and it's easy to go live on Facebook. I've done it quite a few times myself. I've been to events, and sometimes I'll live stream from my phone. It's something that's pretty cool. I always do a gig shot before I do one of these and shows the setup. The problem with a smartphone is the audio is less than desirable because in order to get the phone far enough back to get a decent picture, the microphone is now 8 to 10 feet away. But musicians were performing and reaching their fans on social media. So all these guys came out with all these really cool add-on accessories for the smartphone, little lights to add more light to the scene, and little outboard microphones, gimbals, and stabilizers. But we still have the same audio issues. The talent is far away from the microphone. We're dealing with background noise in the space. And now I've got all these interfaces and adapters to try and put my smartphone on. So let's use the computer. Built-in webcam, my laptop. We're using my laptop's camera right now, and hopefully my my image isn't too bad. I can't really tell looking at the itty bitty picture on my phone from my confidence monitor. And there's a lot of streaming software out there. You can go right to live on Facebook, you can go live on YouTube, and there's some other things out there as well. However, I'm not using the microphone on my laptop. My audio still sounds distant. A friend of mine did a live stream with his laptop. He had a heck of a time trying to get the computer positioned in such a way to get a decent picture. Um, and image quality was less than desirable just because the webcam is not the greatest camera for high quality pictures. And I don't look too bad here, but I do have a couple of secrets, and you'll see those in a minute. So they said, let's take our computer's webcam and let's use an external microphone. And Audio Technica and others manufacture some USB microphones. One of the most popular ones out there is the AT2020 USB Plus. The nice thing about this microphone is it's got a built-in headphone adapter. So if you are streaming and you are doing Zoom and you need to get some audio back, you can also monitor off the computer, or you can do a mix control on that microphone and actually monitor the audio right off the microphone to minimize the latency. And there's streaming software options as well. You can Zoom, you can Facebook Live, YouTube, and so forth. Doing this allows me to get the microphone closer to the sound source. I get a higher quality audio than that itty bitty mic in the computer. I still have the issues of trying to get a decent image from putting my computer someplace. I'm limited to the 10-foot cable on the USB microphone. And now we're starting to get into some potential lip sync timing issues, especially if I'm using an external webcam where I'm sending two USB signals into the computer and trying to combine them with a software piece. A lot of guys are going into podcasting applications, and Audio Technica, like others, are making podcast kit configurations that give you the microphone and a cool little boom arm and a pair of headphones and a nice go-to kit. The game streaming guys, the Twitch guys like this because it gives them that broadcast microphone thing. The dynamic mic is actually becoming quite popular with the Twitch stream crowd because, as we talked about earlier, it's a adjacent style microphone as opposed to the condenser, which is more of a transparent style microphone. The cool thing about these USB microphones is you don't need an interface. You don't need any special drivers. They just plug into your laptop or your computer. The computer recognizes the microphone, and it's ready to go into your software. You can headphone monitor from most of these microphones, and some of them have this mix control that allow for low latency direct monitoring from the microphone. But again, you've got some potential for lip sync timing issues when used with a webcam. I also use some specialty microphones in my live streams, and I like to use a stereo microphone as my room mic. It allows me to use a single microphone with a single cable that flares out to two XLR connections. It looks better on camera. It's easier to position. It's a single mic stand. And in a run and gun situation where I'm trying to go with minimal amount of gear, I can get some pretty decent audio with a single stereo microphone. As I move beyond the USB microphones, I'm using an interface today, an audio interface. I'm using a little PreSonus audio box type device with my computer's webcam. It allows me to use multiple microphones. When I do the full-blown physics of mics class, I actually do some demonstrations and I can plug in some other microphones to the box. I get higher quality audio on the box. I've got monitoring capabilities on the box. I can feed a Q mix out if I'm doing talent and I need to do a stage monitor. But again, I'm running into potential lip sync timing issues if I'm using it with an external webcam. So I stepped back and I talked to some broadcast guys. I said, what can I do to step up the stream? How can I take my streaming level to a higher quality? Well, let me show you what I'm doing here today. This is my setup right now. This is what you're seeing. This is what I see when I'm sitting here at my desk. I'm using the computer's webcam in my MacBook. I'm using the PreSonus USB interface. I've got an Audio Technica studio condenser microphone, and of course, I've got my beloved RCA 77DX because it looks really cool. The first thing I did is I propped my laptop up on some Apple boxes to raise it up so my computer's at eye level. I've got a second monitor that it's just out of the shot. You can't see it in the live stream, but it's the HP monitor that's right in front of the Apple boxes. That gives me a large screen to control the PowerPoint. And I've got LED lighting. I own a studio, so I brought an LED 1x2 panel in, so I'm very well lit. I also lit the microphone display that's on the the bookcase behind me, and I lit the computers a little bit because I wanted some accent behind me. So some set decor, which is all really important. I've watched streams where some guys in a living room full of junk, and you're trying to figure out what all the junk is in the background and not paying attention to the guy streaming. So let's talk about stepping up the stream. And this is my solution. The first thing I did is I went with a pro video camera. My camera had XLR audio inputs on it. And my camera gave me what is known as a clean HDMI audio video output at the camera. Now I'm using a Sony broadcast camera. It's my main camera for doing videos in my studio. You can find pro video cameras that record to tape on eBay for pennies on the dollar today, because everybody's migrated to solid state cameras that are recording to cards and SD cards and so on. So there are a lot of people dump their tape-based cameras. The key is XLR audio inputs on that camera and a clean HDMI video audio output. And what I mean by a clean video audio output is oftentimes the camera will have a video audio HDMI output for a external monitor, but it shows all the junk that appears on the screen, like your battery level and your audio level meters and your f-stop settings and all those things. The clean output gives you just the raw video coming out of the camera. I use a Sound Devices MixPre 10 field mixer, and I chose that over, say, a studio mixer or a live sound mixer because I can run this thing on a set of AA batteries. So the entire system can go battery if I want to. I don't have to be plugged into power. So I can take this outside. We're actually planning to do some outdoor streams in a field, and we'll stream to a Wi-Fi connection that's local that I can reach, but I don't have to have shore power to connect all my gear. The nice thing about the MixPre 10 is I've got 8 audio inputs on it. I can also record the audio. I do a multi-track recording of all these streams, so I've got good clean audio for other uses. I can use studio condenser microphones with this device, and I've got a little control panel that I use with it to give me some fader control and some quick controls and some quick record controls and so forth, instead of trying to access the little buttons on it. So that's my audio setup. I use a Blackmagic Design encoder box. The encoder box is what converts my HDMI signal, both audio and video, to the Thunderbolt digital signal that's needed by the Mac. And then I use a streaming software, which I'll talk about in a moment. The secret, the key to what makes this work without the lip sync issues, is I am transporting my audio and video over the same HDMI connection into the encoder box and then into the Thunderbolt, onto the Thunderbolt digital feed, as opposed to bringing an external audio into a USB port on the computer and the video into another port on the computer. And that's why I minimize the timing issues. It's not a latency, issue, it's a sync timing issue between the video stream and the audio stream. And the sync timing issues go back in the broadcast days, even to the analog days, where you'd have timelines to the delay lines in the video, so you could delay the video to line up with the audio. So that's my stepping up the stream setup. Remember that photo. So I use the Pro Video camera. Pro Video camera is going to give me better low light performance. It's going to give me better performance in bright light with neutral density filters. It's going to give me a better lens, and it's got that clean HDMI output. The XLR audio inputs or allow me to take a balanced line audio from my mixer, or even a good stereo microphone. And because I'm using that mixer, I can feed audio monitors, so the talent gets a full deck monitors. And then I feed that camera into my encoder box. So my block diagram of my setup looks like this. So I've got my multiple microphones for my vocal, my instrument, and my stereo room mic. They go into my mixer recorder. I then send analog audio to my camera into its XLR inputs. The camera then synchronizes picture and sound together. So my vision and my audio are now transported together via the HDMI stream into the encoder device. The confidence monitor allows me to see what's going into my stream. So I don't have to be right next to the camera. I can mount the camera, locate the camera 10 feet away from me if I have to. And then I come out of the encoder either by USB 3, depending on the brand of encoder I bought, or Thunderbolt into my Mac computer. There are some standalone mixer encoder units. Blackmagic Design makes several versions that will send right to an internet connection. I prefer going into the computer because I use a broadcast software. The next thing I'm doing is I'm stepping the stream up to multicam. I'm doing a multicam stream broadcast. Audio stays the same. The audio goes into my first camera. I have 2 more cameras in this stream. Actually, I can do 3 more cameras because the switcher mixer that I use allows me to control up to 4 cameras. I can switch between those cameras. I have a little T-bar control. I can dissolve or blend between the cameras. I can do a little picture-in-picture and whatever I need to do. Kind of like a the broadcast guy, the Grass Valley switcher guy on a big TV show. Roe uses a intensity shuttle Thunderbolt piece, which is a tabletop version of my little box version. It's a newer version of the piece that I have. This little mixer switcher allows me to control my cameras. It has audio inputs on it, which I could use. And it has something in it called audio follow video switch. And I defeated that through its software setup. The reason I defeated that is I dedicate my audio into my camera number 1 through its XLR inputs. So even though I'm switching vision or switching picture, my audio still remains from camera 1. And my audio and video are still lip synced because I'm not switching those streams. Yes, any audio processing or DSP will cause any kind of latency. Now, if there's some DSP in the Roland switcher, I can add some echo, I can EQ a little bit. But as long as my transport coming out of that switcher is together, which it is, I'm still in lip sync. But if I do any DSP processing downstream from my transport point, yes, I'm going to have some latency issues because of the DSP processing. I have 2 monitors in this case. I have a multi-view monitor, which is monitoring each of the 4 camera pictures. And I have the confidence monitor that's coming off the intensity encoder. And then I go into my computer. The software that I use is called OBS. OBS stands for Open Broadcaster Software. It is free open source software for Mac, Windows, PC, or Linux. It'll allow you to stream to all major social media platforms. It allows me to configure. There's a preset for the Blackmagic Design encoders in there. There's presets for other brands of encoders in there. And I can do graphic overlays, and I can send multiple sources to it. I can also record off of OBS, and I can add computer screen playback. It's a powerful software. Roey's using OBS, I think, as his master control for the AES thing. So here's a quick screenshot. I actually shot this right before we did this, so I apologize for the reflections of me in the laptop screen. OBS has something called Studio Mode. Studio Mode allows me to have a preview monitor, which is what's about to go to air, and a program monitor, which is what's going to air. And the ability to transition fades and cuts between preview and program. I also have the ability with the Studio Mode to call up sources. So I have made these lower third graphics for the virtual tip jar. I have an open graphic screen and a closing graphic screen. I bring those up at the beginning and the end of the program. I could bring a video playback in from a device. I could bring a computer screen in from a device. And I have a basic audio mixer in OBS. So at the end of the broadcast, I slate it. I use the computer's mix AUX, which is the computer's built-in microphone. I unmute that, bring the level up, and I slate the broadcast. I use the stream coming from my encoder, which is the Blackmagic Design, on the desktop audio, as it's called, on the little mixer. Then I can set my fade durations, I can record, and then I can send my stream by start streaming, whether I'm going to Facebook or YouTube. The next thing I've done is multicast. I've got artists that want to go to their YouTube channel. They want to go to their Facebook Live. I've got artists that want to go to their Facebook channel and their personal Facebook channel and their personal Facebook page. So I use a product called Caster, and there's another product, and I can't remember the name of it, that's similar to Caster. These are subscription services, and they're basically a multi-stream. So I send my stream to Caster. Caster then sends the stream out to the social medias I've selected to go to. So I can go to multiple social media platforms. Now I'm monitoring right now the stream on my phone so I can see the questions and the comments and how many views and all that. I do that on every stream because that's my confidence monitor to make certain that what's coming, I see what's going out to air. It's the same thing as um, somebody monitoring directly. Comment came back from David that says Zoom Pro has an RMTP output. Yes, there are um, some devices, the Blackmagic Designs, the Zoom Pros, that'll give you a direct RMT, which is a streaming protocol output to stream to streaming services. I still like using the computer because it gives me a little bit more control and I can do some monitoring on it. But Caster allows me to stream to multiple sources. The key thing with OBS and with video, multiple cameras and sources, is you've got to make certain that your frame rate all through the system is the same. A frame rate, I use 59.94 FPS frames per second. All my cameras are set for that. My switcher's set for that. I have my encoder set for that. And I have OBS set for that. If you don't have the frame rate set for the same frame rate for the entire process, it will not work. You'll get black screen, nothing. RealStream's another solution for multi-streaming. So if you want to multi-stream. So we talked about getting the stream out. The last two things I'll touch on, then I'll take questions. And this is what makes it look good stuff. I've seen so many live streams where the talent looks like silhouettes on the shades. Lighting and decor. Step up the stream lighting. You don't have to have big studio lights. You can go out to Lowe's, the hardware store. You can buy these clamp lights for $12 a piece. Some daylight balanced LED spotlight bulbs in the clamp lights, and you've got lighting. The goal is to get front lighting on your talent and minimize the backlighting. The worst thing you can do is put the talent in front of a window on a bright sunny day without any kind of front lighting on them, because the cameras are going to key on that backlighting and that's what they're going to see, and you're going to get a silhouette. The other nice thing about LEDs is they don't use a lot of power and they stay cool to the touch. I've got a big case of hot lights down in my studio that haven't been out of the box in 20 years. Because they're 1,000-watt bulbs, they took a lot of current and they got hotter than blazes. So LED is the way to go. If anybody watched, I'm not an American Idol fan, but I watched a couple episodes of American Idol at home. They sent each of the contestants 6 of those clamp lights with LED light bulbs in it for their lighting kit. And it looked great. Cameras are much more forgiving today. However, be careful using LED stage lights. You know, the ones you get like from American DJ and the classic LED lights that bands are using all over. Because the colors on these LED stage lights don't register well with the cameras. I use these LED stage lights as accent lights in some situations. If you look at the two photos, the one on the left was a band that played at a New Year's Eve gig. And we just happened to be blue lights on the band for some effect. And you can see the poor guy looks like a Smurf. The band on the right, they've got LED stage lights being used as accent lights in this venue. However, the band is front lit with white LEDs to give them some to register with the cameras. If you watch any kind of a show on TV where they're using LED lighting, you'll see the LED lighting, concert lighting, is used for effect, but you're always going to have white front LED lighting. So be careful not to use LED stage lights. The last thing is location and distractions. We did this live stream in a Steinway piano gallery, a nice room, really dark inside. So we added some uplights in the back. That's the blue lighting in the back. We lit them from the front. We added a fill light to light the Steinway logo on the piano because Steinway was a sponsor. Actually looked quite nice. We told the artist to bring some things to add to the decor. So the artist brought these really big LED candles. They look great in person, but when we looked at the stream, the candles look like rolls of toilet paper. And this was like 2 weeks into the COVID lockdowns when toilet paper was a shortage. And I had several people comment on the Facebook comments that the candles look like rolls of toilet paper. Somebody says, and LEDs totally wreak havoc upon my pictures. Yes, LEDs, the low-cost LED stage lights are not forgiving to digital cameras. because of the color balance and the LED lighting. So that's some of the secrets. Apply a little set dressing, some plants, objects. Take away things that are distracting. If they're in front of a cluttered room, take away some of the clutter. Be creative. Christmas lights are a nice piece to decor for set decor. Think about unwanted people and items in the shot. I had somebody do a live stream and their significant other walk through in a bathrobe, because they were trying to get to the bathroom behind this guy performing. So, just be aware of your surroundings. We don't think about that stuff because our brains will ignore it. It's just like we ignore a lot of background sounds because our brains are just designed to tune those sounds out. So think about that kind of stuff. So with that, as I said, remember that image? That's my stream image. I do this gig every week at this guy's living room. And lo and behold, it made the cover of an international magazine, Stepping Up the Stream. I'm Steve Savanyu. I hope you enjoyed this. I'll take questions. I'll take comments. I'll take snide remarks. Stepping Up the Streams. Roy, should I go to jump off a PowerPoint and go to my ugly mutt, or should I stay on this last image?
I would suggest you turn off the screen share.
I'm going to turn off the screen share.
And that the Peanut Gallery thinks of any interesting questions to please present them right now so we can ask you before we experience Zoom fatigue and we get ready to close this up. Let's see. I'll put myself here for a moment.
Thank you, Ron, for the nice comments.
Let's see.
Oh, really good question. I didn't touch on this from Michael. I'm reading the Facebook comments. When I go out to do a live stream, I have an app on my phone. It's a free app called Ookla, if I said that correctly. It's Speed Test. And I will go to the person's house, and the first thing I'll ask them is, what's your Wi-Fi like? If I can't get Wi-Fi, can I get a hard connection? I have a hard connection and a 100-foot Cat5 cable for my MacBook. When I walk into a space, the first thing I'll do is I'll run speed test from where I'm going to set up. That's important. Because the guy will say, my Wi-Fi is great, but you got to set up over in this corner of the living room to maintain social distance. So I'll run speed test from where I'm going to set up. And I'm looking for a minimum of 5 megabit up and at least 10 megabit download speeds. So I can run the confidence monitor, because I actually monitor the Facebook feed on the computer as well as the phone. I control the Facebook feed on the computer so I can see the stream. They call it stream performance. It's a Facebook Live function. And if I'm multicasting on the computer, I'll open up both Facebook on one web browser and I'll use a second different brand of web browser and open the YouTube stream, so that I can see what my stream looks like. But I ask for at least 5 megabits upload speed and 20 megabits download speed. Most good Wi-Fi will get that. I've actually streamed through a hotspot connection on my phone in a guy's driveway because his internet wasn't working. And I actually streamed to a guy. I was in a guy's driveway. I streamed to his neighbors. He had a one of the mesh networks, and he brought a mesh port out, and we plugged it into an extension cord at the end of his yard, and we streamed to his mesh port because the guy that was doing the gig, his Wi-Fi connection was awful. So 5 megabits upload speed on the Wi-Fi. I like 20 megabits download speed so I can monitor things. And then I tell the person, if the kids are playing video games and stuff on the Wi-Fi network, shut all that stuff off, because it will affect the stream. Something else I've just recently learned is, before you start a long stream event, go into your browser and clear the cache, especially with Facebook Live, because after a certain amount of time, Facebook Live will look like it's not receiving your video, even though the stream is running fine. And it's just because the cache in your browser is full, and it's some weirdness with Facebook Live. That's the other reason why I monitor the stream on my phone, as if I'm a viewer. So I'll stream from that person's Facebook page. I actually go on in the computer and log in as them. build the event, whether it's a live stream of Facebook Live event directly, or we do a scheduled event, and then I share. Then I become a friend with them, and I share their stream on my phone, and I monitor, which is what I'm doing right now, so I can see the questions and the comments. Um, so that's my technique. Um, so any other questions? Uh, yeah, how about that? Yeah, about the guy in England whose mistress walked through the sea. I've heard about that guy. Heard about that guy.
David Bialik is making a technical comment that it does not sound like you're sending metadata on the stream.
I'm not sending metadata on the stream. I am not sending metadata on the stream.
Right.
I'm sending just straight.
That lowers the burden on the bandwidth as
It,
well.
it lowers the burden on the bandwidth. My goal is to get the cleanest picture I can. And the other thing I've done is in my encoder, because right now everybody's streaming. So Facebook Live is limited. I think YouTube is also limited the resolution at what you can stream. So Facebook Live is 720. I think YouTube is also 720. So if you're trying to stream an HD 1080p stream, it's going to get knocked down to 720 when it hits the Facebook Live servers. So what I did to lower my burden on the pipe is in my encoder, I set my output going into the computer at 720 resolution, and that still gives me a high quality picture. And it helps me lower the burden, especially when I'm in somebody's house that's got really mediocre internet service.
Right. A recent guest on our panels was Tay Hoyle, talking about live shows she does with her wife, Vicki Genfen, called Front Porch Thursdays. And they actually, in North Carolina, the service they were using, they were lucky they were getting 2. And their signal was still pretty robust, but it was challenged. She recently got a new modem and set up and has moved it up, I believe, to 8 or 9 now.
I can stream on 2.5, but it'll get a little choppy, and some of the transitions will get a little funky. Someone said, would you go to 30 frames per second to help the stream? I have not. 30 frames per second. I'd have to try that and see. I don't know. I have not gone to 30 frames per second.
You usually work at the 1080i.
Yeah, 5994 is my rate. That's just what all my gear is set for, and that's what I shoot at in the studio, and it just helps my feeble old brain to remember not to have to change the camera settings when I pull the camera into the studio for a video project.
I took your advice to heart a couple of weeks ago, and I've set all my things to that rate as well, and everything's been working flawlessly. I'm not showing that today. Today I'm just using a MacBook camera and Zoom, but I'm just saying my video setup is quite inspired by Steve, and I also operate at the 1080
5995.
Exactly. So Michael is asking if OBS has any filter or effects compatibilities.
Clarify filter or effects. Are you talking visual effects or audio effects?
I suspect he's talking visual, but maybe because we are AES, maybe he's actually talking audio.
I think
we have a little delay here, but Michael should be able to answer that question.
Yeah, the Facebook 30 seconds. By the way, there's what it's called transmission delay. So we're streaming out. It's going to Facebook servers. It's getting processed by Facebook, and then it's coming back to us. So there's like a 25-second delay. Yes. So I always tell anybody that wants to watch the stream in the space I'm streaming, including me, turn the audio off on your phone. Sure. Because you will have this just awful delay. Okay, visual effects. OBS has some basic transitions and wipes and things. I haven't gone in to see. It'll do picture in picture. You can scale with OBS. I did a thing with Lenice Bent where we did a recording in OBS, and we scaled video, and then we did a little picture in picture of her talking. And I know Lenice was watching a picture in picture of Lenice talking, and that way she could stay we recorded that. It was pretty cool. I haven't really played. I'm using OBS mainly as a master control point to get out. I haven't really played with it enough to see what all of its cool things are. I most recently discovered the hotkeys function. I now have hotkeys called up for each of my sources. So I want to bring in the opening graphic. I hit the B key for beginning. The ending graphic, I hit the N key for end. And the tip jar little lower third that pops up, and those are all developed in Photoshop and saved as PNG images. I hit the M for money. So just was easy for me just to tap keys on the
Yes, again, referring to
computer.
our other guest, she uses quick keys for the artist to be able to teach guitar and switch between three cameras easily with quick keys on the keyboard. So that is a great feature. I can say that in answer to the question, without having actually done it myself, OBS has tremendous facility for effects. Just Blaze does his usually weekly or several times a week live show, which he streams on Twitch and Facebook and Twitter all at the same time, and Twitch all at the same time using Restream, similar to what Steve does with Caster. And he has Alpha Channel logo, spinning logo on the top, all kinds of green screen effects that he's keying on the back wall, and it looks like he's in a spaceship flying with his reflector speakers and his console, his Ravens. So it
Yes.
really does look like a spaceship. His presentation looks quite professional. I'm quite certain he does most of that with OBS, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. OBS was originally developed for the Twitch gaming streamer guys, and they're doing as Roy said, they're doing all kinds of visual effects and spinning logos. For what I use it for, I haven't got into that level yet. I could have put a green screen behind me and done an artificial background and keyed in things of places I've been and stuff like that. But I'm basically using it as master control, so it gives me my preview and program monitors. But every time I step up the stream, I discover more things I can do with OBS. And I just
Are
realized I
you
have a
are
weird
you
twitch in
using
my mouth when I'm talking.
are you using OBS to be your actual master recorder of your final program to store, or are you capturing with some other device?
I'm using OBS to a hard drive in the computer to be if I capture it. But most of the time, I've done so many of these, I'm just streaming them. I'm letting the artist just pull it back off their Facebook feed. And there's a way you can go into Facebook, for example, and it's a Facebook Live video. And there's a trick you can use where you can go in and share the video and then convert it to an MP4 video and download it. So I've had several artists that have done a live stream and let them do it. So it saves me the burden of trying to deal with a
Capture.
a multi-gigabyte video
Sure,
capture file.
sure. I believe you told me that you also have a device that if you need to, you can feed it into that. It's a standalone recorder.
Yes, I do a lot of screen capture training videos for Audio Technica, and I have a device called a Video Assist, and it's basically a standalone HDMI SDI video recorder with a 5-inch screen on it, and it records to SD cards. It's a Blackmagic design piece. And if the artist wants to do a hard copy capture, I'll bring that with me and I'll feed that out of the confidence monitor output. So loop through on the confidence monitor. And that'll record some pretty high resolution ProRes video files.
Nice. So we have another question from Michael Jong about using outboard for audio maximization. Do you plug in your Manley variable mu and your massive passive on your stereo output during these events or in post-production? I assume he means something like that.
Yeah, I try to keep because I'm trying to keep the setup as simple as possible in the field. So I use no processing on the going into the mix pre. Although I'm toying with maybe adding a little bit of reverb just because some of the rooms I'm doing this in are really dry. And some of the vocalists really need reverb because they're really need reverb.
So then you
Um,
would probably pass it through and use a mixed dry situation as opposed to having it be a console and you have to send and return. You'd probably slap the reverb on that stereo insert and then dial in 3 or 4 or 5, 10% of the return of the wet
and
uh,
just to add a little reverb just to sweeten the
ambiance.
just to ambiance the room a little bit. And on the mix pre has a software option that allows you to do that. I've got one coming up that's it's a bigger act than the mix pre will handle, and I'll probably take, and they want monitoring, so I'll probably take one of my other digital mixers out. The key to this is I can do everything I want in the digital mixer. So I could use like a QSC Touch Mixer or a Persona Studio Live console. The trick to this is I'm going to send that analog audio into the camera, so I'm transporting into the encoder audio and video on the same transport.
Yep.
That's the magic. Instead of trying to take, say, a digital output from my mixer as a DAW interface and going into the computer, that's when you start getting into all the timing issues.
Right. The police said it best, right? Synchronicity.
Synchronicity, and it depends on how big I want to go. um, I'm not certain. I'm reading Michael's question here on the question feed. I don't know enough about which I know a few of the Zoom pieces. I don't know which one the H6N is. Um, but the Zoom makes a little recorder that's very almost identical to the sound devices. I'm just a big fan of sound devices from my broadcast and film location days. I don't know which one the Zoom H6N is, but there's an 8-input Zoom piece that's actually really nice. It's actually quite affordable piece, but I don't know the model number, so I have to plead my model number ignorance. If everybody if Zoom would have called it a Mix Pre 8, then I would have known which one it was. I just don't know the model number, so I apologize to Michael on the model numbers.
Right now, by the way, I'm using an H6 as an audio interface, and I'm speaking to you on an Audio Technica 3060, which is a tube microphone, and that's going into the H6, and that's really useful for when I want to play back music during my Zooms, play DJ or share a mix with someone. I play it back as a stereo input into the Zoom, so I don't have to share the screen, and I usually just play it right from the computer, right through the mini jack, right into the H6's 2 inputs, and it's down and dirty, but boy, it works really well, and allows me to have my dialogue and my music playback instantaneous. So I'm a big fan of the H6 for that. Of course, you could do that with any USB interface.
Yep.
But this is a nice little extended use of the field recorder as just a USB interface.
I don't know which one the H6 is physically to look at it, but I'll have to go look up the model number when we're done. If it's the one I think it is a really nice piece. Like I said,
this is the H6 I'm talking about.
Okay.
I believe that Michael's talking about an updated version.
Yep. The cool thing about all these interfaces is they're all really high quality. And it's just, I like the Mix Pre 10 because I wanted 8 inputs, and it's actually got 2 more coming in on a little 1/8-inch jack, so I could bring a playback device in. The other thing I do is I'll multi-track record the audio because I'm all about the audio. And that way, if the artist wants to do something with high quality audio when we're done, we can do it.
Post-production mixing.
Yeah, post-production mixing. And I can always go back in and post-production mix and sweeten the audio, and then take it back in, pull the video, take it back in, and synchronize that audio to the video, the post-production audio to the video, if they really wanted to take it to that level and do some finished product off of the final stream. But right now, our goal is to, live entertainment is pretty much null and void. They've just started in Ohio to allow, duos and little acts to perform in bars and restaurants, but nobody wants to go to the bars and restaurants because the cases are starting to spike again. And so we do these things in somebody's home. It's their bubble. It's their space. I maintain social distance. Nobody touches my gear but me. The vocalist will bring their own microphone. They'll bring their own cable, and I've got a little interface box they plug into, which is just basically a little splitter box. And that way they don't touch anything of mine. I don't touch anything of theirs. It's just taking all that really, really seriously, and trying to, allow the acts to feel comfortable in their surroundings. And I try to minimize the amount of gear that I carry in just to make the setup quicker and excuse me, make the setups quicker and just make it work better. I mean, I got enough gear. I could do a whole remote truck and park it out front and do a whole production, but I'm trying to keep it simple. Let's see. Oh, here we go. We were talking about this the other day. This is Michael. Interested in renting a venue to have a more show-like stream and monetizing. That's where we are now. Um, we're looking at how do we monetize these? So the virtual tip jar, it's okay. Uh, how do you sell Eventbrite tickets, and then you give them a link to a stream that nobody else can get to, and a venue location to do it. I have a jazz nightclub space in my home that I could get a four-piece band in here and still maintain some social distancing. There's a local nightclub venue that does, I think, a once a week stream from their bar because they're closed, and they have a streaming setup in there, and they're doing a similar step up the stream type event with high quality audio and high quality video. The other type of cameras I've seen people use are DSLRs, and I have DSLRs. The problem I've run into with them is they shut off after 30 minutes of runtime because the sensors overheat. So I've gone to the broadcast cameras, and I found that the newer GoPros will give you a clean HDMI signal, and you power them off of a wall wart power supply or a phone charger, and they'll run forever. And for your a simple wide shot. Um, but that's the next step as we move forward in this, is how do we monetize these for both the act and the production people. The piano gallery situation is kind of an interesting thing I'm doing with this one artist, and we're doing a four-piece band, and it's a big room, and there's going to be five of us in the room, so even the piano gallery folks are leaving when we come in. The downside I have with the room is they painted the walls all black, and it has no nice lighting, so I have to take a lot more lighting in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one I'll use, the bigger mixer, because I think I'll run out of inputs on the mix pre.
Speaking about performing in venues and streaming from there, that's actually something that also I mentioned earlier, Just Blaze. He's been doing an event where maybe 8 different DJs do back-to-back sets, and their set is broadcast in this warehouse in Austin, and that warehouse has huge screens and big remote, very light type setup, remote light, robot lighting, and feels like you're in some kind of a nightclub. Of course, it's odd. There's no people in the room, but it gives it a certain, more of a style of as if you went to see a DJ show or performances. For those people that like to go to those kind of things or to dance clubs, it's not quite a live band show, but it is on the same wavelength of broadcasting from a venue. I know one of the people watching now, Steve Lucas, has been doing a lot of live shows himself and his partner, and he's been playing his awesome guitar, and she's been singing, and they've been broadcasting pretty much weekly. So it's not at a venue,
Yep.
but it's instead of going to see Steve at a venue, because he used to play with Les Paul and many other great people. So you get to watch him from his broadcast center. So I guess it's a good thing that music and art still exists on some level, because who knows what we would have all done during COVID if we didn't have that to keep us entertained and involved.
I totally agree. And the other thing about this is we're looking at, there's a lot of restaurants and facilities that are opening for indoor dining now, but they've got to socially distance their space. And so a lot of these places have big screen TV set up that they show sports, and oh, there's no sports right now. How about that? They're showing that they show things on. So we're coming up with an idea where we'll set a three-piece jazz band up, or a trio or a four-piece jazz band up in my nightclub setting venue, stream that, make that stream available to a restaurant for a fee, that they can then play that stream on their big screen TV. So it looks like there's some semblance of entertainment, and then pipe it through the sound system, the background music system in the venue. And so now the act is saying, oh, we're coming live from Fred's Bar and Grill on a Friday night here. And, if you have requests, we're, send them to Facebook, and we'll play your favorite jazz tune. So we're looking at possibilities of that as we move forward, because we don't know what's going to happen. A lot of the venues, the stages just aren't big enough to bring a band in and socially distant the band. And a lot of places, they don't allow dancing yet because of people getting close to each other. So it's a really strange interesting place we're in right now.
Indeed. All right. Well, we all really appreciate your time and your input today and your wonderful presentation. Your physics of microphone presentation is world renowned for those of you who haven't been aware of that before. And it was a pleasure to have it presented here in our AES New York section, which of course the entire world can watch. We don't keep the world out. We let everyone in. And we'd like to thank everybody for attending and watching and comments and questions. Steve, all the best with Buford T. Hedgehog Productions. And man, I wish you could tell us about some of those non-disclosure gigs that I've had the pleasure of hearing about. But you guys will just have to take my word up for it that Steve has witnessed a lot of crazy things.
Well, I can tell you this much. I am the archive recordist for the Commission on Presidential Debates.
There you go. There's the inside scoop.
And I have done microphones for the Pope and the President. And I've actually sat in the Pope's chair, which was very interesting for that gig.
Well, you got to check the level, right? I mean, it's only
got to check the level. And yeah, I've been places that don't exist on maps and in just some of the most interesting places, but it's all been fun. And I absolutely can't wait till I can come and do Physics of Microphones live to the AES chapter in New York, which we had planned to do in the spring, but was our original plan. But our friend COVID kind of stepped in at the last minute and kind of Morona,
because that's what many are, and COVIDiots. But I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yeah. That's all right. So,
but yeah, that was a shame we had to cancel that, and we look forward to the day when we can have you and do that, because obviously live you really handle mics and show us things, and
I do lots of fun things with microphones in the live version of that program. So, and we do some hands-on with the students as well, which is really cool.
Having had the pleasure of seeing it twice, it's always different and it's always great. So thank you very much, Steve.
And thank you guys
for watching. And want to let everyone know we'll be making an announcement soon for our next events. We have a couple of exciting things coming up, some subject matters about podcasting, about music publishing, about the Music Modernization Act. We'll keep you posted, and those events are coming soon. Again, Steve Savanyu, thank you very much, and everybody have a great weekend.
Take care. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks for having me. Bye now.